very enthusiastic about the subject. I've done a bit of reading about this. I'm really looking forward to cementing my understanding and beginning to put this into practice. So if you're joining us from wherever, if you can just introduce yourself on the chat, tell us where you're joining us from and what you want to pick out from today. If you can share those on the chat, we'd really appreciate that. Introduce yourself formally so that we can connect beyond this session. I would really appreciate that. I'm Emmanuel Osang, as you can see from the screen, one of the Inspire Synergy leaders. And we will formally introduce our speaker, but let's just pray as we start, if you don't mind. Father, we thank you for this time. Thank you for the opportunity to hear new ideas that you have, you want to bring to us. Lord, we know that every time you give us revelation, you want to deliver us, you give us revelation. We pray, oh Lord, that as we listen to what our sister Lorna has prepared and every other speaker, I pray that you will empower them. I pray for Emmanuel as well, who will be moderating the session. I pray that you empower him, and as he guides us through the evening, I pray that you give him wisdom. We pray for everyone who's here to learn and to contribute in the discussion. We pray that you will enable us by your Spirit. Lord, we thank you. We pray that this evening will be fruitful, will not go to waste. Whatever we have planned to do and whatever you want to accomplish in this session, we ask that let it be accomplished. We thank you and we bless you. We give you praise, we give you glory, we give you honor. In Jesus' name, amen. Before I introduce Emmanuel, who's the lead for this working group, I just wanted to mention, for those who are joining us for the first time, the working groups within the Inspire Synergy. It's something that has kind of mushroomed from the discussions that we have over the annual conference that has been running for almost 20 years now. We felt that just learning these concepts and people sharing their heart to us and their knowledge to us would actually practically try and bring it to life, and hence the formation of the working groups. We have this, which is the Metaverse. There's the opportunity with the diaspora, which is connecting the continent with the diaspora. There are the community initiatives, which talks to how do we solve challenges within our community. And then finally, there's the accelerating critical skills development. So this is one of the working groups, the Metaverse, and really coming from presentations that we've seen here around challenging thought and creating new innovative ideas that will revolutionize our world. They're coming thick and fast. So we want to be part of and enable any of these new developments that are coming. We want to take full advantage of these innovations so that we can be effective as Christians in the marketplace. So really that's the background of the working groups. For today, we thought that it would be great for us to really have somebody share with us about this Metaverse before we start the working group proper next week. So beginning next Monday, we'll have to start to form the groups that will actually drive some of the activities and the initiatives in these groups. On that note, I would like to introduce somebody who's going to lead this working group from an Inspire perspective, and that is none other than Emmanuel Rukundo. So Emmanuel, I welcome you, then you introduce our guest speaker today. I welcome Emmanuel.
Thank you so much, My namesake. I'm so happy and glad to contribute to this community. I first experienced a bit of the metaverse through a VR experience in 2020. My previous background was in design, and I wanted to use it to design spaces better. And it really excited me then. And then we had, I think, Inspire 2021 and 2022, where we had a number of sessions challenging us on creativity and innovation, and that was a confirmation. And I held on to what I learned through those sessions, and it's brought me this far. I am a VR developer, and for 2 years now, and we're doing a lot of interesting work. And that's how I met Lona and a number of other people who started pioneering then. And we've kind of grown into a small community. Yeah, I will introduce Lona. Lona is a creative technologist, and she's really passionate about Africa and emerging tech. And I think I'll just let her dive in and share a bit about herself. Yeah, then we'll continue in the Q&A. Lona, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, as well. And thank you so much, just the Inspire group, for making these very intimate communities exist. So I'm Lona Okeng. I am a creative technologist and inclusive innovation scholar. And what that really means is it truly boils down to using technology and engineering to push the boundaries of creative expression. And my work sits at the intersection of art, culture, and technology. I'm deeply, deeply invested in the future of Africa's culture spaces, but also the continent's digital creative economy. And that is how the metaverse, kind of plays in there. And I'm very, very excited to be part of this discussion. And I would really like to invite you to this kind of we can argue that it's future-centric, or we can argue that it's already here. But the argument is that these technologies that are emerging, and for the very first time, they haven't been colonized yet. It's an equal playing field for everybody, and Africa can take full control of the narrative, of its narrative, in how it shapes these new tools and these new technologies. So yeah. The context of this discussion is, again, entirely for Africa, the metaverse and its constellation of opportunities. Again, what about the metaverse? I think over the past couple of years, the media has been awash with discussions about this theme called the metaverse. I think 2021, Facebook rebranded to Meta, really making it clear that they are channeling their energy into this, what people imagine would be the next iteration of what our current internet looks like. So there's just general interest across the board beyond just individuals who are meta curious, but we have also seen over the past 2 years, private capital injected quite heavily in metaverse related projects, startups, etc. A report by McKinsey published sometime last year predicted that the metaverse in 2030, in the next 7 years actually, has the potential to generate about $5 trillion in valuation. And as of last year, metaverse related investments went up to more than 120 billion US dollars. So it's very, very clear that this is an opportunity that is here, and it's too big to ignore. And Africa needs to take full control of how then it wants to play and be included as part of this innovation process. We also saw Afropolitan, which is an African startup, raise $2.1 million US dollars to build a digital nation. And the argument was, what would an Afro-optimistic Africa look like? Do we have spaces to create and imagine spaces where an Africa which is filled with abundance, which really mirrors its diversity, its dynamism, its talent, and its true greatness. That is one of the first African startups to really get a nice a nice ticket to experiment in this new space. We also saw MTN Group being Africa's very first large corporate to invest in this space by, I think they did announce sometime last year that they did acquire 144 plots of digital land in a metaverse known as the Ubuntu land, which is again an Afrocentric or Afro-focused digital virtual world. So again, the definition of what exactly the metaverse truly varies depending on where exactly you are. If you are a technologist or a gamer, you could also argue that, the metaverse is here and it has been here for a very long time. For people in the gaming space, anyone who has experimented with Fortnite, with Minecraft, people who have played with Second Life, and those virtual spaces can also argue that those literally they give us an idea of what this space then could be like. Of course, there is that very clear speculative utopian concept that is also still in discussion, which is a very interactive world where we can fully immerse ourselves, be interactive with each other, just traversing space and time. There is that. But I think for this, the purpose of discussion, and also not to lose, just not to lose people who are wondering, is this speculative or is this real? I think the closest to the definition of the metaverse that we have today is really using an imagination of what the internet as we have it today would be when we combine virtual reality, augmented reality, and other technologies, including super high fast internet speeds. So yeah, so in a nutshell, in the most easy way to describe it, I would say, and really the definition would be, it is a constellation of technologies. It's bringing together very different technologies and then an extension of the internet in a way that it will be a shared digital reality, heavily using the immersive technologies, again, virtual augmented reality, and I'll keep using virtual augmented reality. You hear that a lot because that is the closest that we have as a medium of interfacing with this new space that then allows us to truly connect with one another, build a sense of community, actually build economies and interact in real time in a way that we wouldn't otherwise. So just a second, let me just go back here. Okay, so for again, a definition recap, the best way to fully then understand what I just said, I'll just give a quick recap of what the definitions are. The umbrella is extended reality, which is really an immersive technologies, but under there we have augmented reality, we have mixed reality, or we have virtual reality. Simply put, augmented reality is an augmentation or a relay of digital assets onto a physical world. So anybody who has played with Pokemon Go, if you've played around with any Snapchat filter in its most basic state, that would be what we call augmented reality. So you're still in full control of your physical reality or your physical world as we are in it already. And then you have digital assets that are then plugged and relayed and interacted with in your physical realm. Virtual reality, on the other hand, changes things totally, that it doesn't include at all the physical world in which we are existing. What it does is it uses some kind of computer-generated simulation of an alternative space that requires some form of hardware or interface to be able to interact with. And then you get the illusion that you're actually in this virtual world and not the current world that you're in. Mixed reality kind of bridges the two. So those who are in the gaming space, most people may have interacted with virtual reality in gaming or in VR. I mean, in 360 video, what is this? Google Earth tours. If you ever put on a headset that teleported you in a different space, that would be a virtual reality. That would be a virtual reality experience. So now that we have that, the next obvious conversation would be, now, who exactly, beyond the technical definitions and the concept, the real question is, who exactly is building the metaverse? Now, for context, we'll be kind of contrasting with the current internet, the World Wide Web as we have it today. So for context, our existing internet, the protocols, the software, the infrastructure are designed and really entirely developed by a certain, and really entirely controlled by a certain group, a few large tech cooperatives. So you have Google, you have Facebook, Meta now, you have Apple in there, you have Amazon. So these guys find themselves pretty much monopolizing what the internet as we know it today is. So that's the infrastructure level. On the other level, you would find then the content. So the internet as we have it today is a collection and really a convergence of, I would say, humans' collective knowledge, but it only holds a certain number of the world's information. In fact, Google's mission was to make the world's information universally accessible. And what they found was only 5% of the world's information sits on the internet. So now you can only imagine, we really, like, you can go and Google and you feel like you have all the information that you can have, but Google is arguing that only 5% of the world's information sits on the internet, which is actually quite valid, considering the contributors and the website builders and the content creators. So 99% of the internet content that we consume today, or that sits on the World Wide Web, is curated or created by 1%. So again, that is a very big digital content divide. What that means is that the internet as we have it today has a lot more consumers than creators. So you have 99% of the content that's on the internet being created by 1% of the content, 1% of the internet user populace, which is about, I think, 3 to 4 billion. And if you look at the demographic of the content creators and developers, the people building the algorithms, the content on these places, the websites, most of them are English-speaking European or American men. Okay, so the reason why this then becomes very, very important is that when we ask ourselves who builds the metaverse and why Africa needs to take full control of its narrative at this particular point, is that while this technology is fantastic, what happens is that if it's left for a certain group of people to build the same corporate metaverse, we risk the reality of having the challenges and the shortages of our current internet imported or exported onto the metaverse, whether it's issues around misinformation, whether it's around digital abuse, whether it's around the ethics of the internet. All those realities will be exported if this new technology that we are building is not inclusive. And I think that's why it's very, very important for platforms like this to exist, where we then begin to understand what's our share in the space and how we can actually plug in. So again, the metaverse in its current state, again, is it's wrapped up to about 7 to 10 layers, depending on which particular a subtract you belong to. So the 4 categories are entirely, content and experiences, which is for most people, that will be the point of contact and point of interest, really. So experiences, discovery, you'll see a lot of games, you'll see a lot of theater, you'll see a lot of esports and shopping, the content creation side and the content absorption side. Then you have, of course, the platforms that this content will sit or will be built upon. You have the infrastructure and the hardware, and then you have the enablers. So when we are breaking it down, if you look at the layers, I'll walk you through it. If we start with the content and experience, as I said that already, you have the content that is developed by the users, the creators, the developers, that really enriches the metaverse experience. And I think this is a huge, huge opportunity for the continent as well, whether we have our developers, our young talent, our innovators. From a content creation perspective, the metaverse presents a very huge economic opportunity there. In fact, it's predicted about 23.5 million jobs may be created that will require virtual and augmented reality used by 2030. So for those who are tinkering in the space, that gives you insight on kind of the future of work and the future of jobs that would emerge as we build for this space. The next space you would be looking at the different platforms that then facilitate the access and discovery of that content. That's whether the experiences, you're looking at the apps and the different platforms that then are designed for creators of 3D experiences. For the gamers here, you're looking at the Unity platforms, you're looking at Unreal. This is where there are also opportunities there tier 2. Then infrastructure and hardware. Yeah, now infrastructure, we cannot, this is unfortunately something that we cannot run away from beyond just content creating. We really need to understand the hardware side of things. Right now, almost all the tools and the hardware interfaces that are available, very few, in fact, we have, as far as I'm aware, there's only one African startup called Eden Hub that are really building a virtual reality headset. Everything that we have, all that we are familiar with, whether it's the Pico, whether it's the Oculus, the Quest, the Go, etc., all those are hardware that are being developed by the big companies, whether it's Hive, whether it's Meta itself, whether it's Google coming in the space and Apple as well. So for the engineers here who are in electronics, mechatronics, there is really, really room to experiment with the kind of hardware that then will allow us to interface with these different worlds. On the other level, we'll also see the operating systems. There's also room to develop the virtual worlds on which these places would sit. We saw Ubuntu Land is an African focused virtual world, but what we already have in the space, we have Sandbox that's heavily investing in the space. We have Decentraland that's also heavily investing in the space. We have Second Life, which has been there for a couple of years now. On the third level, we would have, okay, so also in terms of infrastructure and hardware, we talked about 5G. As we evolve into 6G, we are looking at faster cloud computing services, faster networks, etc. So for those who would want to invest in level, this is where the big telcos come in. And then you'll see, that's why you'll see companies like MTN really try and get their stuff in the game now already, because they're trying to understand their position as an internet service provider, understanding that this technology also strongly relies on super fast internet. Where is their position? And then on the other level is the issue of the enablers. Who are the people who are going to be the advocates? Who are the people who are going to build enabling frameworks and environments for the metaverse, whether it's the creators, the consumers to thrive? Here we're talking about people in security, privacy, governance becomes a huge part of this discussion for the whole metaverse to really function fairly and equitably. Okay. Next up, where are we here? Okay, so again, I would want to reiterate that it's again super important to know that this technology is still young, it's still in development. The full framework of technology is required to realize the metaverse doesn't exist as we are speaking today, but we have ideas of what then it would be. Our closest understanding today is we are using devices. So for most people, you're using your mobile phone as your core medium of interaction with this virtual space. So then you begin to see your screens or your mobile phone act as some form of like extension of yourself or artificial body that allows you to interact with this virtual world. For the virtual headsets that are wearables at this particular moment, in our current status today, we need devices to interface with the two realms. In the future, it could be very different, but that's what we have today. Again, there are opportunities for advancements across the board, whether it's in computing infrastructure, whether it's in the networks itself, as I'd mentioned before, whether it's in content consumption. We need app developers across the board. So whether the metaverse is speculative or whether the metaverse is really here to stay, is it a technology that's just a group of enthusiasts or a group of sci-fi lovers are trying to experiment or play around. We can argue yes or no, we don't know exactly, but I think the kinds of investments that are going into the space, and if there's anything we're to learn from history, it is really truly that this technology is here and it's here to stay. The metaverse has been talked about for almost a century now, 100 years. The first concept or idea of the metaverse was written in sci-fi literature, and we saw it in film. As you can see in this 2002 Minority Report, I think here we had Tom Cruise trying to use some form of gesture control. This is an illustration what augmented reality would be. And the idea was, how do we collapse space and time or geography and information in a way that you could interface with audio visually. And this is what film, over 20 years ago, film was trying to give us a feel of what these spaces would be. So fast forward to where we are today, the technologies are actually catching up with the imaginative creations that, the creative industries allowed us to tap into. And I always like to mention this, that technology, if we are really to look at the history of technologies, all forms of technology, there is a way that art, and art, I'm talking about film, fashion, music, etc. Art has always, for some weird reason, strongly challenged technology, and technology is constantly trying to catch up with art. So if you really want to look at the next disruptive technologies, always look at what the artists are saying. What originally looked as sci-fi 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago is what we now call real-time and disrupting or emerging technologies, or actually existing technologies. So there's also a place for especially historians who really want to help design and predict and project innovation. There's a lot to draw from what already existed, and then allow technology to literally help push the boundaries of that creative expression. Just a second. Okay, sorry. Ooh. Okay. Ooh. Okay, there we go. Again, the idea is that we are creating digital worlds that give us a feel of what our physical realities look like. This is another example of what an immersive or metaverse looking world would look like. And this is an episode from Black Mirror for those who watched White Christmas. And in this episode, they were really using immersive tech to allow you to block a person in your physical life, similar to how you would kind of block somebody that you didn't like on WhatsApp, just block them. But imagine you're walking in a space and you could just block people that you didn't want to see. This is very dystopian, but this was a projection into some of the ideas that this space would look like. A lot was done in the film space, in the sci-fi space, but I think and that's why it can seem a little bit dystopian. But I think what the purpose of this is really to see that art has a key place in this discussion, and that artists and technologists actually have room to play and interact and co-create. And I think this is the very first time we are seeing that kind of convergence, where the artists and the technologists, or the innovators and the engineers, are beginning to work together, because the tools and what is required to then build these new technologists will require multidisciplinary expertise beyond what we are familiar with in computing or in engineering. And that's why you're seeing a lot of convergence across the board. But again, I would like to then interest you in okay, how is this then relevant to Africa if we bring it home? How far are we in terms of the headsets? These virtual reality headsets already exist, a number of them. In terms of augmented reality headsets, there's also a number of them in the pipeline. All of them are not necessary, most of them are not that great, but again, it's because the technologies are still young, experimentation is going on, computing power testing is happening at the same time, but there is a lot of room for innovation in this space, and it would be really, really cool to see African innovators and universities plug into this space. We have seen we are seeing also interesting, more kind of blurry there's a bit of blurriness in, as these technologies then advance, in what then becomes real and unreal. And because of how fast the innovations are going, we are seeing just a very strong interconnectedness, that these technologies again will be extensions of ourselves, not entirely replace, but kind of extensions of ourselves. So blurring the boundaries between what we consider physical, what we consider digital, etc. So we are seeing projection mapping already in place, holograms and adaptive screens. These technologies already exist that are allowing us to really experience spaces like we have never experienced before. In terms of use cases, there are predictions of where these technologies could go, but where virtual and augmented reality technologies are already being used in retail, education, in sports construction, in fashion, in tourism, in gaming, logistics, etc. These technologies are already being experimented in these these different sectors. In terms of the value creation that the metaverse provides, again, there is huge opportunity just based on the predictions that are made in terms of especially building the talent that will then build this technology. So I think Africa remains the youngest continent, and by 2050, it will be the most populated and the youngest continent still across the board. But we have a problem that we have such a massive shortage of talent, and yet we don't have a shortage of talent. We have a huge young population and a limited job supply. So what Africa then can position itself is become the talent pipeline for the rest of the world. Look beyond, as we explore remote work, look beyond just building for Uganda, look beyond just building for Kenya or South Africa or Africa, but building for the world while seated in your country. And these are the kinds of opportunities that we would really, really be interested in exploring, the talent pipeline that's going to build this metaverse. I kind of talked about this already, but I will, there are use cases that are already in existence. In terms of museums becoming a little bit more interactive. For those who are really invested in African heritage, you would know the discussions around the board of about 95% of African artifacts do not sit on the continent. And they sit in Western museums and in private collections. So what our current museums then look like is they're pretty much empty. What immersive technologies do is, because they're not limited by space and time, they then allow us to kind of repatriate and kind of get a feel of what exactly a museum with all African artifacts would look like. So some kind of digital repatriation, some kind of multi-sensory experience of objects. These are specific places where we will see a lot of immersive tech come in quite strongly. In terms of social impact as well, whether it's, placemaking, digital signage, if KCC, for example, wanted to put directions and place-making charts, this is an opportunity to do that. Augmented reality allows us to do that. It also revolutionizes the way we learn, revolutionizes the way we experience just different spaces and different objects. Those are very easy use cases to experiment with. Interactive books as well. Social media is what we are very familiar with. Visual arts education there as well. But this is the next two slides are the ones that I would really want us to be, I would want to draw your interest in is, okay, how can we utilize this emerging technology or the idea of the metaverse to really disrupt the way we create or the way we innovate? Some of the discussions that are really traversing global discussions is world population. And personally, it's who is building Africa's next cities. And if you're looking at these statistics, they can be quite worrying, but they can also be quite exciting. Africa's next, I think 7 out of the 10 next mega cities are going to be on the continent. yeah, and you have Cairo, you have Lagos, you have Kinshasa, Nairobi is written there, but I would want us to specifically talk about Kampala, for example. Kampala city was designed to accommodate 300,000 people. It was designed in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and it could only accommodate that. But if you fast forward to where we are today, we have about a 2.5 day population in Kampala and a 5 million day population and a 2.5 day population. So a day population, sorry, my mind, a 2.5 day night population and a 5 million day population. The day population are people coming into Kampala to trade, to work, etc. The night population are people who are resident in Kampala. So if a city was only designed to accommodate 300,000 people, and right now it's choking at 2.5 million, it really means that the city is not in position to accommodate, and the infrastructure is just not capable of hosting that massive number of people. So what that means is that ideally right now and across the board, just knowing where we are going, and with these kinds of projections, who is building the next capital city of Uganda, or what are the next capital cities of what are the next main cities to help decongest Kampala? Now there is a startup called Spectra, and they are an open source platform, and they're using virtual cities to build real cities. So the discussion here is, because Kampala is completely full, there is not much you can do. Even the new cities that are being built, whether it's Lira, whether it's Mbale, whether it's Mbara, Fort Porto, etc., they have already been designed. So what virtual cities then allow us to do is, what would a city that accommodates 25 million Ugandan look like? Can we build it in a virtual world and then ship it into a physical world? Proper urban planning to the absolute detail, and then ship it into a physical world, actually build a city based on a virtual world that has been designed with urban planners, with policymakers across the board. So that would mean you would have to go and look and acquire, 2,000 square miles of land that are vacant. I'm sure it's somewhere in Uganda, and try and build a new city in that regard. Those are some of the discussions in terms of the practicality of how the metaverse or these new emerging technologies become relevant to us. Because the reality is, by 2050, Uganda, Kampala is at 5 million daytime, and this is 2022. By 2030, there is no doubt that we could surpass the 10 million. But the reality is, we are not building our infrastructure at the same pace as the population growth. So that is something that, for architects, for urban planners, for policymakers, these are tools that then allow us to build smart cities for the future that will be able to accommodate our growing populace. Next up will be in terms of interactive festivals and experiences. I think this is the biggest seller of the metaverse or emerging tech, as it allows us to see currently, is that it's not limited by space and time. A physical show, the same way I said, a museum can only accommodate a certain number of objects because it's truly limited by space. It can only sit in a specific place because it's only limited by space and time. And therefore, the Uganda Museum can only be found in Kampala. If I'm in Lira, I have no access to the Uganda Museum. This is what immersive tech then allows us to blur the lines. I like this particular example because this is, I think, one of the biggest case studies that we saw post-COVID. For musicians, the two-year lockdown caused them to completely lose revenue. There were no live performances. Most artists depend on that. So with the lockdown, there was just nothing they could do. Now, fast forward to last year, Davido, who is Afrobeat sensation, big guy, held his first London O2 Arena show. And this is a show that fills up a stadium of about 20,000 viewers or participants. But what was quite interesting about this is, of course, the tickets are $300. Of course, this is a show specifically based in London, so it's quite exclusive. So what happens to the other fan base that is interested in a Davido concert but will not afford an air ticket, $300 to attend this show, plus an air ticket, plus a visa, plus hotel, etc, etc. So they came up with a very interesting idea, and this is where MTN came in. MTN partnered with a digital streaming platform, again, African streaming platform called Udux Music, and they live streamed the concert virtually. And this wasn't an immersive experience. It was just a pure live stream of the real London 2 Arena, just giving other people an opportunity to get a feel of what these gigantic theatrical performances look like. And to the shock, I think they were as shocked as we all were. 700,000 people who paid $4 each attended the live stream. Now, when you contrast the money that was made, the revenue that was made out of a virtual live stream, 700,000 times $4, versus about $2.8 million was raised from the live stream, versus the $300 times 220,000 participants, and then you had to pay, the stadium, you had to pay all these different people. That really blew the minds and just kind of changed the way we then look at spaces and the way we look at experiences. And I think it was from that experience, because MTN Nigeria was a sponsor for that event. It wasn't shocking that fast forward to November last year, MTN Group declared that they're going to host Africa's first virtual music concert in the Metaverse. It's because they clearly saw the opportunity that did not exist a year ago. And these are the most basic and very easy use cases that are quick to just pick and run with as we tinker around, as we prepare ourselves for this new technology. The reality is the technology is here and it's here to stay. We can also argue that, maybe it's a facade, maybe it's just, something that will come and pass. But the reality about disruptive technologies, if there's anything that we are to learn from history, is that they really, their biggest selling point is their ability to cause scalability. So a perfect example would be, 100 years ago, funnily, 100 years ago, film did not have sound. So you would have silent films and you'd have a musician literally perform in a film. And that was called real music. And when we started recording music, the kind of music we listen to, whether it's on radio, whether it's recorded music, basically it was recorded and it's played later, was called canned music. And there was such a rally against this thing. There was this whole discussion by different unions saying, how can these technologies or robots will never be able to replace living musicians. They can never be able to duplicate living musicians. And the funny thing about disruptive technologies, if there's something we can learn, whether we are seeing what's happening with NFTs, whether it's what we're happening with AI generated art, an artist saying it's going to replace, it's not considered accurate art, or whether it's what chat GPT is doing, and academicians are wondering if it's compromising education and research and the intellectual rigor that comes with that. The reality about disruptive technologies is they actually don't seek to replicate. What they really do is they sidestep and make old standards and processes completely redundant. They don't seek for permission. You either adapt or they just kind of bypass you. And if there's anything that we can learn from 1930, when the American singers were striking against recorded music, is that, nobody today, where we are now, no one really cares. Most of the audience doesn't really care about traditional quality or actually seeing the musician in real time all the time. What these technologies have allowed is to really scale at cheaper levels and democratize really access across the board to much larger audiences. And in a nutshell, that is the same kind of foresight that then the metaverse that presents. The beautiful thing about this technology is it's still young. It's so young. The rules haven't been set yet. everybody is invited to the table, and this is why it's more than important for Africa to take full control of how it wants to shape, how it wants to build, and how it wants to use the metaverse for itself, and become an active contributor for the creation of what that space would then look like. Yes, and I think with that, I have talked a lot. I will stop right there. And
Thank you, Lorna. I think that was a crash course on Metaverse. I think I really enjoyed it. I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion, but it was very, very, very good summary, condensed summary of this subject area. So really thank you for preparing and the depth of knowledge that you have for this. I would just welcoming those who are joining us from wherever. Well, thank you for joining us. You've missed, if you are late, you missed a lot. But the good news is the recording is there, so you'll have access to the recording. I'll open it up for questions for Lorna. And the best way, I think, to do this is if you can type on the chat your questions, I'll pick them up and then relay them to Lorna, or just direct Lorna, so that we have a little bit of order. I see some people are peeping, so it might be difficult to mute and unmute and so on. If you're brave enough, you can put up your hand. I'll see if we can enable you to ask questions, but just if we can use the chat in the interim, I'll pick the questions and just maybe relay them to Lorna. So it's really purely up to you. But Lorna, just maybe to start the questions and the Q&A, and just your thoughts around the what you discussed. One of the things that really struck me was the very core of this, which is the infrastructure. Majority of this infrastructure is owned by, like you said, by the, let me say, Western world. How do we, Tembi, you're welcome. How do we ensure that we are not constrained by that? As I know that you've kind of given us a number of ways, and I will touch on those different ways that we can participate, because sometimes you can be paralyzed by your kind of challenges when there are more opportunities than the challenges that you actually see. How do we navigate this, the fact that the infrastructure, the core of this is currently owned by the West? How do we navigate that? Just your thoughts around that.
Interesting question. Wow, I actually don't think that I may have an specific answer for that, because the reality is the same challenges that we face today in setting the current internet as we know it. We still face the same challenges. It's kind of crosses over, that we don't own our infrastructure, that we and that also contributes to why Africa has the highest internet what is it called? Internet
penetration.
The cost of internet is most expensive. Yeah, the cost of internet is most expensive on the African continent, really because of the infrastructure challenges attached to that. But there are lots of discussions around virtual, around building virtual infrastructure. We have a Ugandan, I think, this is Raxio. So what Raxio is trying to do is, you know, how do we plug into the existing infrastructure, and how do we at least take control of some of the parts, whether it's caching, becoming like there's discussions around building huge caches that then help reduce the process of just transmitting data from where you are, your machine, back to the main servers and back. So if we use cache systems, does that help? But also then there's discussions around what is the role of nations, and what is the role of our policymakers in this regard. I know Uganda, we have NITA, I'll just speak briefly for Uganda, Nita, that actually build the fiber backbone of the country. But again, we have to understand that these are huge financial investments that require key players. And I think MTN, we have to give MTN and the telcos, but specifically MTN, they have been the biggest investors in the infrastructure across the continent. But again, it would be really nice to see some kind of long haul innovation across the board, and long haul fiber connections that bring, multiple other players, and it's not monopolized. So I think the challenges that we face today, the challenges that we face with the current internet, that's why we fear that we may inherit the same issues. But these are discussions that could also be taken to, Africa, kind of like the Africa Free Continental Trade discussions of, is it possible for Africa as a collective to build its own infrastructure? There's room for those kinds of explorations. But I can the promise is things are a bit tight. It needs investors across the board. But I think it also comes with, it needs the believers. And I think the responsibility is for, people who, the responsibility, I think, is across the board. It's for all of us. How it will play out, I have no idea, but you have a very important point. We cannot fully control the narrative if we are not taking part in some of the core parts of it. So that's definitely an issue that we have.
I think so. I think that's a very good summary. But I just had also some thoughts while you're thinking, some thoughts that came through. I do believe that if you look at, for instance, Google, Facebook, these guys did not start by controlling. They actually started by creating the content. And because they own the content, they actually now own the internet. So I guess maybe starting to climb the tree from the top is not bad. Let's create as much content, build skills. Before you know it, we can actually end up owning the infrastructure. I mean, even the likes of Amazon, they started with retail. Now they're actually offering cloud computing because they got money from like the end points to create the infrastructure. So I don't think all is lost. We can start climbing the tree from the top, which is a rare occurrence. It's tough, but it's possible. So I think that's the only thing I would add. Just listening to, I thought maybe we shouldn't. Hope is not lost. There's place for us, given the layers that you've actually described, the apps, and there are places where we can actually play in big, really big. I see comments for you. I think Brenda, just appreciating you for the discussion, and she says you should throw more light on purchasing things or investing in the metaverse. So how can somebody like Brenda start to participate in this metaverse that is developing quickly?
I like how everybody jumps into the investment side. That is quite interesting. But again, there's multiple layers. There's multiple layers of the metaverse. Again, depending on where you are. Are you looking at the content side of things? Are you looking at the content consumer side of things? There's opportunities there. There's the infrastructure side, as Emmanuel just kind of shed light into as well. There is the hardware side of things. There's opportunities there. Really depends on where you want to see. But I think the purchasing things or investing in the metaverse, I think the first thing I would really encourage anybody to do right now is just familiarize yourself with the metaverse as it is, what already exists, what is happening, what are the developments that are happening in the different spheres, who's building what. There are some key players already in the space, especially the gaming space. NVIDIA is in there, we have Roblox in there, we have Epic Games in there. Apple is already in the space. HTC is in the space. These are some of the people who are building some of the key platforms as well. In terms of those who are building virtual worlds, we also have some cases I was just looking at a couple of people who are a couple of companies that are really building some of the experiences in that space. We have like Stageverse. Stageverse creates concerts, music concerts, virtual music concerts. So again, depending on what it is that you're trying to look at, you would really need to go and read about these different virtual worlds or these different platforms. Ubuntu Land would be something that I would interest people to read about, because why it particularly resonates with me, although it's not at the same level as the other ones, is because it's really Afrocentric. It's really trying, I think it's Africa's very first virtual world under construction. It's also the same one that MTN bought its plots of land in. So there is a website, if you would want to go and check it out. I would encourage you to just like look it up and just scan through. But for now, I wouldn't, and this is really just me being cautious, that I wouldn't put my money or, buy anything, whether it's virtual plots of land, unless you're really sure that you're pretty much ready to lose that money, because the technology right now, we are not quite sure in the direction in which it may go. But again, what I would encourage is really for people to just familiarize themselves with the different platforms, the different players in the space, and just understand the direction in which all of them are going. It's very clear that there's still no fidelity across. All the virtual worlds are not communicating, they're standalone. While the internet as we have it today, you can seamlessly go through website by website, it's like all interconnected. The current virtual worlds we have do not have that same, they don't have that same interconnectivity. And that's the worry, is it may take a little bit longer for us to have that kind of seamless fidelity across the existing platforms. So yes, so for Brenda, please just read for now, familiarize, check a few platforms out. Do check out Ubuntu Land, do check out Decentraland, Sandbox, a couple of those. Just see how they play out. Also check out Spectra Cities. I'll share the link here. It's the city that I talked about that's using building virtual cities. It's a group of people that then translates into physical cities. The platforms are there. You can join the different communities and really see what people are doing. Yeah.
Thanks, Lorna. And I guess obviously it's not like news. We want to actually build an Inspire Land. Will be the first one.
Yes,
so Brenda, get ready to invest. We're going to, our aspiration is to build Inspire Land, and I'm sure it will interest many. Want to inspire as many people as possible in the continent. Inspire Africa. The one thing that I saw missing in your list of use cases, Lorna, was almost all the areas are covered, but I didn't see anything to do with religion. And if I look at the churches today, it has a big base. Why is it missing? Is it deliberate? I know I'm asking a very difficult question.
No, it's interesting. Actually, it's not deliberate, but where churches and religion comes in quite strongly to me is the sense of community that the metaverse then creates. Yeah. And really going back to what this thing does is it's trying to blur the lines between time and space, that then it allows you to build communities with people that you would not necessarily meet in your day-to-day activity. So I think right now, if I'm just talk about Abrahamic religions and in a blank, they're like what, 2.1 billion. 2.1 billion. No, Christianity is 2.1 billion, about 2.1 billion followers. And that's just the umbrella Christianity across the board. So what, and we imagine a virtual world that is specifically built, because again, borrowing what we are seeing in the gaming space, because I think the gaming space is the one that has really tried to curate an imagination what this space could be like. Imagine a virtual world that was, again, is specifically dedicated to allowing us understand our faith more. And more interestingly, and this is quite, I hope I will not be caught, this will not be used against me. One of the things that I think immersive technologies presents is that I feel it is the closest to a mirror of what spirituality would look like, because then it allows you to time travel, it allows you to recreate or teleport and all these other things. And I think those kinds of experiences and those kinds of imaginative interactions can be recreated in virtual world. But especially the sense of community, I think that would be one of the biggest spaces, the biggest opportunities that the metaverse would present religious-wise. It's connecting people, just accelerating evangelism in virtual realms. Imagine how that space then would allow. Emma, you've gotten me into a rabbit hole. Because now I'm thinking what Facebook did. Facebook in 10 years built a community of about 3 billion people. Technically, Facebook as it exists today is bigger than the Christian
community,
like Christianity collectively, right? And it's because they were able to leverage technology to build communities across the world. Now, imagine we then use that same kind of methodology and ideology of thinking to spread the gospel virtually. That means you then have access to, the 4 to 5 billion people that would then be able to come online. I think there is also room there. Emmanuel, very interested to hear your thoughts in that regard.
Great opportunities is all I can say. I think it's something to explore, and you've touched on how we can actually explore the opportunity. The opportunity is immense. And I really asked that question. It was like a leading question, saying the reason why we are interested in this space is the opportunities that we see in this space as Inspire to really take the gospel to the projected tens of billions of people by 2050. So I think it's massive opportunity there. I saw somebody's hand went up. I think it went down again. It was Charles. Charles, do you still want to ask the question? I want to give you the opportunity since you're brave. Was it Charles?
Thank you very much. You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you. I want to thank you for the presentation and also for hosting Lorna. It's interesting to have this discussion, especially at this time when we are discussing about the new technologies. I'm impressed particularly with two things. One, she has talked about the real metaverse and the investment that is involved. Looking at the concern exactly you raised about the infrastructure, we don't have a tech as Africa, majorly, we are minority. And then the other one, of course, I think the engineering component has a bigger role to play for us Africans to stand the opportunity in the next metaverse. I think I don't know how these resources can be mobilized, but it is the bigger picture. But I was impressed also when you said it is better we start climbing the tree from up, that we can develop basically the ones that we have. Yeah, especially the content. Now in this content is where my focus is. In education, because I'm actually an educationist, I think we can mobilize our resources in education and put the content together. And I don't know when she was talking of plots of these kind of things. And you have also put the religion in the other side. Do educationists have a particular area of content development, or the content is vast, regardless of which area of specialization people can, so that we just collect whatever we have together. Then the other one is the enablers she talked about. This enablers brings me an understanding of the leadership of some of our countries and the policymakers, because to some extent, most of our leaders have been corrupted by the West, because when we talk of this metaverse, it has economic implications, as we have ably brought it clear that Africa is likely to get returns of around $40 billion. And the West, I'm sure, will not be very comfortable to lose economically to Africa if we put more resources to our benefit. And that's why in most cases, in some media houses, people are saying some of our leaders are compromised by the West. If they don't abide by them, they are killed. So the enablers also has a bigger picture to play. And then maybe the last one is how are we going to strengthen this group so that you talked in the introduction about the working groups. How are we going to develop these working groups? I don't know who are these working groups. Are all the attendants here part of the working groups, or there are those specific working groups that work and they give us others, the followers, the opportunity to get what has been worked on. And then on top of that, is it possible to invite other people also onto this platform so that we build a bigger platform to enable us come up with much relevant content? Because one of the areas that I strongly believe that even in the current internet, much as the Google, the Facebook, what we call Meta now, has dominated, but African culture is still not properly captured, even in the current one. So I think as Africans, we also have that opportunity to have African culture much more invested in the metaverse. That is my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Very well articulated. We should have made you one of our speakers, but thank you for your contribution. Well noted. I think you've touched on very, very key points that we need to pay attention to. There's a link on the chat about how to join the working groups. Maybe just to add, the working groups are open to all like-minded people like us who meet after 2 weeks, I believe, to actually start to get into the details of the actual, because it's just easy to talk conceptually, but to get into the details of what can we do? So come up with some action plans. It's part of the bigger Inspire, but this is specifically for the metaverse. The groups will meet every Monday, same time. I think we'll skip a week in between, but we'll share. If you want to be part of the group, there's a link that has been shared for you to join the group. You can invite members again to that group. So we're looking to really make this practical, not just to theorize it, and look for the support across the entire Inspire community of 5,000 people to connect with what we're doing. And I'm sure there will be those that are interested. There are a number of other things that I see this connecting with, because if you look at, for instance, critical skills, the work group that I lead, I think this is key. How do we plug this into that working group as well to ensure that we actually push for these emerging skills for the continent? I think the win for us really is to acquire the knowledge and things to learn. I mean, emphasizing that start with acquiring the knowledge and the expertise, and then you can think about investment, because we don't even have the money to invest anywhere at the moment. So invest in yourself, I would say. Make sure that you invest in yourself as much as you can, and then the rest will follow. But very, very, very pertinent points. Somebody asked about UCC, the involvement of UCC. I don't know if you saw it. Is there any part that they will play other than NIRA? Is it NIRA or NITA?
Yes, so NITA, because NITA is the National IT Infrastructure Authority. They're in charge of the backbone, the kind of ICT infrastructure, but they work definitely very closely with UCC, or are actually under UCC. So the responsibility of UCC as a government body, multiple things. Governance is non-negotiable. Enabling frameworks and enabling environments that will support all the different layers of what then becomes the metaverse, whether it's creating enabling frameworks for creators or for developers. All that still falls under the responsibility of the Uganda Communications Commission. Whether it's regulating the infrastructure and the players that come into the space, that is also the responsibility of the government bodies. They have that mandate. So they are hugely responsible for putting together. They are actually the co-enablers. They set up the enabling environments where everybody then thrives, whether it's, keeping an eye to make sure that the security, the privacy discussions and negotiations across the board, generally governance, will be the responsibility of entities such as UCC. So they definitely play a critical role, because anybody who comes into the space attached to communication or information or ICT has to go through UCC. So they become a core enabler. Policy, they are really policy makers. So at the end of the day, you can't do anything without policy makers. So the more we include everyone, and that's why it's then very important that we include all the different parts of the ecosystem. And Emmanuel, that's fantastic when you said why the groups people need to start just having discussions. We have lots of fantastic talent, my goodness. The developer space, I think that we really, really have good talent. But again, how do we create communities that accelerate them or catalytically support them? Or how do we bring in development partners or private sector or investors to then invest in this kind of talent? All that means getting all the different parts of the ecosystem to start talking at the same time. If not, we'll just have some really great developers who will just have to leave the country in order to get their work done, because the system is not enabling for them.
Thanks, Lorna. We just probably have one more question, and if there's any, because we're trying probably in the next 5-10 minutes try and wrap it up so that it's not too late in Kampala. I don't know if there's any question, but there's something that you touched on, which was around the which is probably not a question but a comment, that this is, when I saw the word inclusive, I got a bit worried, because that word is used in a very dangerous way. But I like the fact that this allows everyone to participate. So there's nobody who's left out. You can't sit and think, I'm not a technologist, so I'm kind of left out. This is truly inclusive. You can go to your lineage or parents, they tell you stories which you probably would not have known, and put that into the metaverse. Remember when we were growing, we used to gather around the fire with our parents or grandparents to tell us stories. Those stories, they are nowhere to be seen. So everyone is not, it is not limited to age, sector or profession. Everyone actually should be involved in this. And I really like your idea of the art leading, which we've seen actually. The revelation of some of the movie makers have, it's amazing. So I really loved that. I thought I would just throw in that comment. I like the idea that there's nobody who's left out. Child, grandparent, parent, teacher, doctor, everyone can participate in this. And that's, I think, the amazing part of pastors. Everyone can. So I really loved that. Just your parting shots, Lorna, I know we're going to have the follow-up working group sessions where we can brainstorm. I really like your thought patterns in what we want to do. I think articulating the what is important. Just your kind of parting thoughts to the audience. What should we focus on given the, I have some thoughts, but I wanted to just get your thoughts first.
I think for me, just two things. Offhead is, or just why I think Africa has a huge stake in this new technology, is that there's a general consensus that this new, the metaverse will be heavily content creator or user generator focused. Okay, that means there's a new class of economic participants that is going to be back. That doesn't exist. So that doesn't exist. So there's a lucrative space for African creators to populate these virtual worlds. Just knowing that, you know, our diversity, our vibrancy, our dynamism, Africa right now is going through a renaissance. So if we really plug into that and leverage these technologies, because these technologies are just mediums, they're just tools of expression. I think there's a massive opportunity there. But also on the other hand, for me, what excites me the most about the metaverse is if we are to really look at the history of how Africa has responded to some of the technologies, is that what seems to work out in the West doesn't work here really, but then what works on the continent would almost not work in the West. So our relationship with this technology is almost peculiar. So if you've seen what mobile money did, just absolute leapfrogging. Mobile money wouldn't work in the West, but it did just disrupted the whole financial sector here. What the dummy phone, the mobile phone did, is that Africa used the mobile to leapfrog the computer age and plug itself into the way we adopted and used this technology was very different from what the original creators were creating it for. So for me, apart from the opportunities to tell our own stories, to be included, there is a lucrative opportunity for us to be economic participants, but most importantly, it is the direction in which Africa will own and use this technology that nobody, even the people who are building, do not know what it could potentially be. And that's why we really need to rally people to become interested and just learn and explore and experiment, find your community, and tinker around with this space and just get rid of the fear, because technology can be also scary. But if we take away the fear and we invite everybody, I think what we could see, or how Africa could shape its part in this space, has the potential to see another form of leapfrogging for the continent. It's something that the world will not be familiar with, but it will work for this continent. And I think that to me is what I'm very, 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 very excited about, the possibility of seeing. Yeah.
Thank you once again, Lorna, for I think those it has been a worthwhile evening, and I'm sure we're going to have you engage even more with this material. This is something that really interests us, and we would like to really accelerate this idea in the continent in the right direction, not just follow what the West is doing, but try and create it in a manner that is that supports our values and the continent at large. But just in way of summary, definitely I see opportunity for us to drive advocacy and awareness. I think there's a lot of opportunity. Just creating that awareness for people similar to what you've done here is something that would be very interested as Inspire to drive. Supporting the talent that exists in the continent to start to create this pool together. The resource people who are already doing some of this this work to bring it to life, I think would be great. I think the other piece is just the talent pipeline. And I'm maybe being selfish because I drive the critical skills working group. It would be something that we really put on the top of the chain, given the not thinking about just what we need now. This is going to be skills that will be required, given the scale of this. It's going to require a lot of skill, and we have the population demographics working for us as a continent. I think it's just, and the fact that it doesn't require you to have specific, you can harness the skill that you have to actually contribute in this space. I'm really looking forward to how the critical skills help this in driving the actual needed talent pipeline. So there are a number of things, and then the use cases that we've talked about. I love the community piece, the Inspire Virtualand, which I can speak it into being now. It's something that we are definitely going to create. There's no doubt about that. So we'll team up with the working group to create that. But otherwise, it's been a great evening. I saw our president actually on the line. Mr. President, I can't leave you just, I hope he's not dropped off. Is there anything you'd love to say before we close? And I saw another.
No, nothing from me. Just to appreciate Lorna for her very insightful presentation. It was captivating. I was sleepy before 9, but she woke me up. I was gaining new information. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, President. Yes, Fred, I would really encourage you to join the group because we've run out of time. I wanted to end at exactly 9:30 East African time so that we allow people to drive. But Fred, thank you. You can leave a comment. We look forward to having everyone in the working group, which starts, Benjamin, just confirm the working group starts next week. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that's next week, and then it will be skipping every one Monday. So please do join the working group. It's not just talk, come and let's do this work together. There's work to be done, like Lorna has painted, and the hands that are required are the African hands. So extend this to as many people as you can, the invitations. I'm sure you've joined the group. So we look forward to having you and working with you. Thank you everyone for your evening. Thank you. I hope you've learned. The recordings will be made available. I'm sure Lorna will share her presentation, which will on share to the rest. But thank you everyone for a wonderful evening, and have a good evening. Lorna, we'll see you in South Africa maybe soon. And see you on Monday, hoping you're joining our working group as well.
Absolutely. I'm already in the chat, so let's build. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for having me, and Emmanuel Squared for the invitation.
Thank you, Mr. Rukundo, for the good work. Thank you, and thank you for steering us. We appreciate everything. Thanks everyone. Good night, and see you on Monday, same time next week.